I would hazard to say that probably most of us come to Dhamma practice having experienced some sort of dukkha, looking for a path that can help us understand and maybe experience more ease in our lives, and to help understand the cause of this dukkha, this unsatisfactoriness that we all experience. The teachings, particularly emphasized like in the chanting that we do in the mornings, the basic chanting pointing out what is dukkha and essentially the causes of dukkha, but describing the various aspects of what it is we call this experience of dukkha, suffering, unsatisfactoriness. Birth is dukkha, aging is dukkha, death is dukkha, all the others, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. Not getting what we want, and association with the disliked, separation from the light, all these aspects of life that we experience as unsatisfying, unsatisfactory, difficult to bear, it's difficult to be with sometimes, many times. And kind of realizing that the usual ways that we try and deal with these experiences of dukkha is not it's not working in the long haul. It's working only temporarily. Trying to, particularly I think, as kind of occurring to me, we do a lot of teaching and we all experience contemplations, particularly as we get older, around the teachings of dukkha in regard to old age, sickness, and death. Right now, probably in our daily lives, most of us, when we experience dukkha, it's often in the lines of not getting what we want and associating with the disliked, whether it's events, personal difficulties, people that we're having conflict with, adverse conditions, is, I think, in this kind of middle parts of our life where we're not actively dying or facing that, or suffering acute illnesses, things like that. Oftentimes a lot of the sources of our discontent are in this realm of having to put up with the world, having to put up with stuff, having to deal with things not being the way we want them to be, often manifesting in disagreements or conflicts, adversity with other people. As long as we're, rubbing shoulders with each other, whether we're in family situations, the household life situation, or the work environment, say we're working with other people on the job, or community life, like in the monastery, we live in a large community like this. We rub up against each other. And oftentimes you work on it in different ways, wherever you are, and I suspect that many, if not most of us who are experiencing this, oftentimes if it gets to be really difficult and things really are kind of just extremely frustrating or problematic, you might hear somebody say in the household life saying, this is ridiculous. Why do I keep doing this? It's time to go to the monastery. Get away from all of these crazy conditions out here in the world, all these conflicts, people not agreeing with each other, and all these difficult relationships I've had it. Time to go be a monk or be a nun, and just set aside all of this nonsense. And then if you talk to a monastic, who's experiencing the difficulties of being in a monastic community and all the problems you have dealing with the hierarchy, or that 24-year-old who's senior to you who's telling you what to do, or just the unreasonableness of the leaders of the community, all the frustrations of people not doing things the way they should be doing them. You think, okay, this is ridiculous. I've had enough. I'm going back to the lay life. Time to disrobe. What's the point of this? People are so unskillful here in the monastery. So you can see, we all get involved with trying to find an escape route from our dukkha, from our difficult, adverse interactions. Trying to always tweak and make the external conditions suitable in a way that we think is going to bring us more peace and contentment and less adversity. And then if you get smart and you do either one of those things for a while, you realize, okay, well, this isn't, this isn't really going to answer the long-term problems. It's just trying to escape short-term discomfort rather than learning new skills about how to work with it in whatever situation you happen to find yourself in this moment. Doesn't mean you don't need to make changes sometimes in your life, but we have to use the circumstances that we find ourselves in, for better or for worse, to help transform how we deal with these adverse conditions. I can't remember exactly the context of when it happened, but I remember, the gist of the story of when Ajahn Sumedho was starting in a new community. I can't remember whether it was when he first was leading Wat Pah Nanachad as it opened, or whether it was when he was sent to England to open the communities there. But at some point in the earlier days, and it was just a small community somewhere, Ajahn Chah was checking in with Lumpur Sumedho, Ajahn Sumedho at the time, and asking, well, how are things going in the community? And it was a good time. It happened to be a good time, and Ajahn Sumedho was responding with, well, everything's actually quite harmonious. We're really getting along with each other and cooperative, and people are, being good with each other, and it's quite pleasant, and the community's going well. Ajahn Chah's response was, well, you'll never learn anything that way. So not to mean that, it's bad to be harmonious, and we certainly put a lot of effort into that here. And I think generally, it works pretty well. But there are plenty of times when difficulties do arise. They're inescapable living in the human realm, in a community. I also remember a story of there was a Russian philosopher, Gurdjieff, who I don't know if it would be appropriate or the use of the word human potential movement, but he organized his philosophy and his practice around community life, and was interested in exploring and developing ways of increasing our well-being as human beings through inner exploration, and also through how we can realize more contentment and increasing our potential as human beings to be skillful in the world for ourselves and for others. And his mode was with community life. So his philosophies and his teachings and his practice were organized around a number of different kinds of intentional communities. And apparently there was if I remember the story correctly, there was a time when there was a very difficult, very, very difficult member of one of these communities who just created havoc the whole time, just, was extremely contentious, always creating discontent within the community in pretty much any way that was possible. And just about everybody was fed up with them. And but Gurdjieff wouldn't ask him to leave. He just refused to do that. And eventually, over time, I guess things came to a head enough that the man himself ended up leaving. And everybody, of course, sighed a great sigh of relief when this person departed. And sometime later, and I don't know how much time elapsed, but sometime later he reappeared and came back to join the community, and Gurdjieff allowed him to do that. And people were quite upset, after going through all of that before, and he finally left. Why are you allowing him to come back? And apparently his response was something along the lines of, well, he actually didn't want to come back. I contacted him and paid him to come back. And it's basically, he had this thought that we need to learn the fullest of our human potential. We need to be able to challenge our complacency, and we can't just if we really want to fully realize the capacity of what we can bear, what we can deal with, all the vicissitudes of life, for better or for worse, then we can't just run away or avoid or annihilate unpleasant experience. One way or another, it's going to come to us. Because this is that kind of realm. The human realm is this kind of realm. There's pleasant experience, there's good things, there's skillfulness, there's unpleasant experience, there's bad things, there's unskillfulness. Because people are people. This is how it works in the human realm. And that if we really want to maximize our full potential in not suffering, then we have to learn how to cope with the difficult circumstances, not just get rid of them. There's a kind of a set of reflections in the Tibetan tradition that I learned when I was practicing a bit. I practiced for a couple of years in the Tibetan tradition before ordaining. I had already been exposed to the Theravada and was practicing in Theravada, but in terms of meditation groups, the most appropriate one when I was living up in Seattle before I actually took ordination here was a Tibetan, under a Western nun in the Tibetan tradition, Thubten Chodron. And one of the teachings that I practiced with and picked up over those 2 years was what they call the verses on thought transformation. And I can't remember all of them at this point, but one that has always stuck in my mind, and I've always thought is a very useful consideration. Something like when someone whom I have benefited and placed great trust in hurts me very much, I will practice seeing that person as my supreme teacher. Yeah, I think I got that right. And I've always felt that was a very powerful way to transform how we generally react in the world. Usually if we feel upset or in adverse conditions, particularly if it's someone that we've had a good relationship with, but even if not, that rather than getting all twisted up and trying to right the wrong or rail against the unfairness of the world or blame them or become discouraged or alienated in any way, we practice seeing that person or that situation as an opportunity to learn something about ourselves as our supreme teacher. Not easy to do. But if we can do it, how powerful it can be to develop this sense of understanding about where the source of suffering really is. In that we expect perfection in people. We expect them to always be in alignment with what we think, what we feel, what we value. And when they don't live up to that, then we experience this, great disappointment, great suffering. And if we can come to accept that, most of us aren't perfect, and there's hidden areas of everyone's life and personality that sometimes aren't seen in the beginning, particularly for ourselves, and that these things, these ways of being, these ways of responding, can all of a sudden manifest unexpectedly. And that this is the way that the human condition is. And if we can understand that for ourselves and accept that in ourselves, then we can also expand and see that when that happens with other people. And the opportunity for developing a great sense of compassion, just for the irony of living a human life and the fact that no matter what we do to help, sometimes things go awry. And we don't always have a whole lot of control over that. So not having the expectation that just because we've done something good or we've done something useful that everybody will respond in an appreciative way, or that if we really maintain our best behavior and try our best to speak well, send thoughts of metta, and act skillfully, then of course we should expect other people to respond in the same way and do the same and treat us in the same way. But it doesn't always work that way. And to develop that kind of acceptance and resilience and equanimity in the unfolding of our experience in the world. This is how we have to transform our thoughts. So in the face of adversity, practice seeing that person or that event as an opportunity to really learn something, learn a skill. Yeah, sometimes when a particular defiled mind is coming up for me, sitting in meditation sometimes in the afternoon or something, and kind of some sort of relentless underlying tendency comes that just grabs hold, like a sense of righteous indignation is always a good one to grab hold of somebody. You think somebody did something wrong, or somebody talked in some way to you, and how easy it is to grab hold of that and stew on it and repeat the same old scenario over and over again in your mind, and then to realize that's going on, the unpleasantness of it, and that kind of, why do I keep doing this? I should have learned by now not to keep, indulging in proliferating around stuff like this. So you can see the effects. It's just really unpleasant to do that. And, sometimes I've found a really good way to break that tendency to glom onto something like that is to just say, hold on a second, this is what's happening, and yeah, it's unpleasant and it's difficult, and I'd rather it weren't here, but this is my duty, this is my task, this is the reason I'm here, is to be able to learn how to view this, to be able to handle this. It's not that it shouldn't be this way. If it shouldn't be this way, it wouldn't be this way. My task in this lifetime is to take this and learn from it and just be with it as best I can so that I can understand it as best I can. It shouldn't be any other way. This is the way it needs to be, and this is the task at hand. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing. So, understand it. So that kind of embracing the First Noble Truth really is what that is. Embracing the duty of the First Noble Truth, the Noble Truth that there is dukkha, there is unsatisfactoriness, and the duty being to understand it, to fully understand it, which means directly knowing it, not just thinking about it, not just speculating, but to directly experience this experience of dukkha, not to indulge in it to the way of proliferating and expanding and fabricating more dukkha around it, but just to fully know it, fully, directly know it. And then we can develop strategies to work with it. In the case of interpersonal conflict, again, which is a common source of dukkha, some of the practices around forgiveness and reconciliation are very useful, so that if it's a interaction or relationship that we have where something unskillful has happened, something painful has happened, the best and most skillful response is if there is some way, if that person is still around and in our lives, is can we work towards reconciliation? And that requires a pretty high level of trust and familiarity in a relationship. And it requires the willing participation of both people, not just one. And so there has to be that bravery and ease with approaching someone and saying, hey, this has been painful, this is difficult. Can we work towards easing that through some sort of mutual understanding? And if that's possible, and the other person is agreeable, then you sit down and kind of talk about the different things that happened and the reactions and the different ways that one has perceived a situation. But the most important thing in the process, not only laying those things out on the table, but is trying to come to some sort of understanding about each other's values and why somebody may have said something or done something that to you was perceived as difficult or painful. Trying to get down to the root of what values that person was working from, what they were looking for, what they were trying to, consciously or unconsciously achieve when this event happened. What was it that they were responding to? And really being open to that. And I can think of so many times that I've failed, but those are the ways that those are the things we can learn from too, how many times I've gone into a situation trying to resolve it or trying to understand, and then somebody says something that kind of triggers the whole thing over again in response to your approach, and all of a sudden you just lose that whole perspective of going the extra mile and saying, okay, tell me more. Tell me more. What was going on when you said this and I felt this way? Just to go that extra step and go to a deeper level of understanding before moving into reactivity. That's, if you can do that, oftentimes it's really quite amazing, the level of understanding and true reconciliation that can come from that. There's times when that can't happen. Person's not willing. The event is so long ago. Person's not in your life anymore. But the next best thing, if that can't be happening, is to practice forgiveness. Forgiveness can always be done by oneself if the other person isn't amenable or available. So we work on this inner process of seeing how we can readjust our perception, how we hold something, what we put our attention on, and developing qualities that are antidotes to that kind of proliferation or unwise attention. We're talking about attention at tea time today. How to, in these kinds of situations, just not go there in that way, that we just increase our entanglement with memories, with difficulties, with adversity, and start to practice in a way that we can let go of it, even if it can't be reconciled. We can let go of the suffering around it. A lot of it is patience. A lot of it is this developing this wide sense of how to peacefully coexist with that which is unpleasant. Expand our ability to hold a painful memory and not get entangled with it. Not let it take up so much space in our heart, so much space in our minds. And it's not that it's necessarily going away forever, or that the memory won't come back, or the difficult person may still be in our lives, even if the problem is not resolvable. But we don't carry that perception with us to the point where it just affects us and we just can't stand being around and want to escape. We just widen and open and create a space that it's bearable, and that we can still experience being in relationship with these other beings who we think have caused us so much harm or difficulty. So lots of good qualities can come from this kind of forbearance, patience, and if we can really expand our sphere of awareness, these are Brahma Viharas, like kindness, the vast spaciousness of kindness for all beings, for this sense of poignancy of the suffering of human life, the vast compassion that we can hold these difficulties with, realizing with equanimity that there's pleasant, there is unpleasant. There is the effect of karma. People are acting in old ways and old patterns, including us, because we just haven't learned any better. But we all have the potential to. So we accept that, and we hold that, and we just keep plugging away with lots of kindness, compassion, and equanimity. Patience. And then, as those qualities open and expand too, with this willingness to be with it, then wisdom develops too. Discernment. We learn what's worth putting our attention on and what's not worth putting our attention on. And we just slowly, skillfully learn better ways to be in the world. Sometimes we get, entangled not only in personal situations, but the state of the world. If we read the news or hear what's going on, sometimes it seems like, particularly these days, the past number of years, recent years, that what's happening out in the world seems so crazy and unbearable, and many world leaders doing things that are very harmful, very difficult, very challenging. And we can kind of just want to escape all of that again. So, realizing that we can't, we learn what it is that we can have an effect with and what it is that we can't have an effect with. There's, people who are very much engaged in trying to help create a better world, and that's all very good stuff. And it's also challenging in the sense that as much as we want to create, a utopian kind of world where people are doing things that are skillful and helpful and kind and compassionate and generous, creating egalitarian structures, and so that there isn't such a divide between rich and poor, and privileged and unprivileged, and all of powerful and unpowerful. These are all kind of societal ideals. And of course, even the Buddha talks extensively about the conditions that are necessary for that to arise. And so there's a template for that. But stop short of saying, make this your mission. Because as long as samsara exists, there will be these cycles in the world where there's a proliferation of goodness, and where there's a proliferation of very unskillful kinds of things happening. It's the cycle, these cycles of existence, these cycles of goodness and unskillfulness that seem to keep happening. So it doesn't mean we don't act in any way or don't advocate, but we concentrate on doing what we can. And I appreciate a William James quote that I won't remember in any exact way at all, but it's sort of like, for myself, it's like something along the lines, I'm done with, trying to make great changes and great institutions and great plans for the betterment of the world. And now I'm more inclined to practice in these small, quiet, unseen ways, attending to the moral fiber of my actions and my speech, so that in very small ways, like the way water will creep through the cracks in a rock. And eventually, over time, this unseen process of the water creeping through the cracks in the rock, eventually the big rock just crumbles in the same way that these unseen forces of goodness, virtue, will slowly crumble even the most entrenched evil paradigms. So it's the little actions, the ways we conduct our own lives, little by little, creeping through and spreading them through the people that we're in contact with, that will make the eventual changes. We just relentlessly do that. And creating communities of refuge. There's a lot in the world that it's really not worth taking refuge in, a lot of ways of being, people we associate with, different, ways of how we use our time, wasting our time out in the world. It's a possibility, but we always need to keep redirecting ourselves, gravitating towards places where there are these pockets of skillfulness in the midst of craziness. Like here, like monasteries. We seek out groups of people to associate with, to be with, to support us, who share our values, who share our common aspirations for how to live, with adverse conditions. And we support each other in that process so that we know that we're not alone, and that even when the worst times come out in the world, and if things start to really go chaotic, well, there's a refuge. There is these small little pockets where we can tap into, be part of, and rejoice in the fact that there is goodness in the world. And do what we can to nurture these places and these beings, and realize that actually that's what we're all yearning for. Because the Buddha's teachings are pretty clear. We have this potential to realize complete freedom. The true refuge, the final refuge, isn't even in the skillful communities and the good qualities. These are all conventions that will change over time as well. But the true refuge is in the teaching, in the Dhamma, and in the relentless patience and practice and diligence and determination to realize it in our lives. And we all have the capacity to do this, and I think all of us here have the intention to do that in whatever way we can, whether here at the monastery or out in the world. We just need to keep that intention fresh and use the supports of practice that we've developed individually in our individual practice and in the community, the people that we surround ourselves with, to keep going, because what else is there to do? So I think I'll just leave that for a few moments of reflection tonight. Moments of reflection tonight. Moments of reflection tonight. Moments of reflection tonight. Moments of reflection.